What happens when Hollywood's brightest star walks onto one of America's biggest morning shows, expecting a normal interview, and instead finds herself under attack from a host who seems determined to tear her down? In just 27 seconds, one question would turn a friendly chat into an all-out war that ended with cameras cutting to black and a global superstar storming off set in front of millions of viewers. Margot Robbie arrived at the Good Morning America studios that morning, like she had dozens of times before. The actress, known for her roles in blockbuster films and her genuine, down-to-earth personality, was there to talk about her latest project. She smiled at the crew, chatted warmly with the makeup artist, and settled into the bright red couch across from George Stephanopoulos, with Robin Roberts and Michael Strawn seated nearby. The interview started normally enough. George opened with a smile, welcoming Margot to the show. Robin leaned forward with her trademark, warmth, asking about how Margot was doing. The actress laughed, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, saying she was excited to be back on the show. Michael nodded along, the energy light and easy. But something was different about George that morning. His smile seemed tighter than usual. His questions came faster, sharper. Where Robin and Michael kept things breezy and fun, George seemed to be waiting for something. "So, Margot," George began, glancing down at his notes, "your new film has been getting mixed reviews. Some critics are saying you're playing the same character over and over again. What do you say to people who think you're not really stretching yourself as an actress?" The studio went quiet for a beat. Robin's smile faltered slightly. Michael shifted in his seat. It was a pointed question, one that seemed designed to put Margot on the defensive right out of the gate. But Margot handled it with grace. She smiled, took a breath, and said, "I think every actor hears that at some point in their career. I choose roles that speak to me, that challenge me in different ways. Not every challenge is obvious from the outside." George wasn't satisfied. He pressed forward, barely acknowledging her answer. "But you have to admit there's a pattern here. Beautiful woman, charming, gets by on looks. When are we going to see you do something that requires real acting?" The air in the studio changed instantly. Robin's eyes went wide. Michael actually turned to look at George, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. The crew members standing behind the cameras exchanged glances. Margot's smile disappeared. She sat up straighter, her voice calm but firm. "I'm sorry, did you just say I get by on my looks?" George shrugged, as if he'd asked the most reasonable question in the world. "I'm just saying what a lot of people are thinking. You're a gorgeous woman. That's undeniable. But when are we going to see the substance? When are we going to see you really act?" Robin jumped in quickly, trying to redirect. "George, I think what Margot has done in her career speaks for itself. She's been nominated for multiple awards, worked with incredible directors." But George talked right over her. "Robin, let me finish. Margot, you've made a career out of playing pretty characters. Don't you think it's time to prove you can do more than just look good on camera?" Margot's jaw tightened. Her hands, which had been resting casually in her lap, gripped the edge of the couch. "George, with all due respect, that's incredibly insulting. I've spent years training, working, taking on complex roles. To reduce all of that to my appearance is not just unprofessional, it's disrespectful." Michael nodded, his voice supportive. "She's right, George. Margot's body of work is impressive. She's done everything from drama to comedy to action." George barely glanced at Michael. His focus stayed locked on Margot, and his tone grew more condescending. "I'm not trying to insult you. I'm trying to have an honest conversation. You can't deny that Hollywood has given you opportunities because of how you look. That's just reality. Some of us have to work harder because we don't have that advantage." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Robin actually gasped. Michael's mouth fell open. Margot stared at George, disbelief written across her face. "Are you seriously suggesting," Margot said slowly, her voice controlled, but shaking slightly. That I haven't worked hard for my career? That everything I've achieved is because of my appearance? George leaned back, crossing his arms. I'm saying that beauty opens doors, and once those doors are open, you have to prove you belong there. I'm still waiting to see that proof from you. Robin tried again, her voice urgent. George, this is not appropriate. Margot is our guest, and she deserves respect. I'm being respectful, George shot back. I'm asking tough questions. That's my job. Maybe if we asked more tough questions, we'd get more honest answers. He turned back to Margot. So what is it? Are you afraid to take on challenging roles because you might fail? Is it easier to just play it safe and rely on your looks? Margot stood up abruptly, her microphone nearly pulling out of its pack. The sudden movement startled everyone. A camera operator stepped back. One of the producers in the control room started speaking frantically into her headset. I am not going to sit here and be insulted on national television, Margot said, her voice clear and strong. I came here to talk about my work, not to be attacked by someone who clearly has some kind of agenda. George stood too, his voice rising. Agenda? I'm a journalist. I ask questions. If you can't handle that, maybe you're not as professional as you think you are. Asking questions is one thing, Margot fired back. Being deliberately cruel is another. You're not interested in my answers. You just want to tear me down. Robin stood up, placing herself slightly between them. Okay, let's all take a breath here. This got out of hand. But George kept going. You know what your problem is, Margot? You're used to everyone kissing up to you because you're a movie star. Well, this is the real world. Out here, we don't care about your fame. We care about substance. And I'm not seeing it. Michael stood now too, his large frame towering over the scene. George, man, you need to stop. This is way over the line. Stay out of this, Michael, George snapped. This is between me and our guest who apparently can't handle a simple interview. Margot laughed, but there was no humor in it. A simple interview? You've done nothing but insult me since I sat down. You questioned my talent, my work ethic, my entire career, and now you're acting like I'm the problem? A producer rushed onto the set, trying to calm things down. Let's take 5, everyone. Just take 5 minutes. George ignored her. I notice you're not actually answering any of my questions. You're just getting defensive. Maybe that's because you know I'm right. Maybe you know that without your looks, you'd be nobody. The studio fell into a shocked silence. Even the camera operators seemed frozen. Robin put her hand over her mouth. Michael shook his head in disbelief. Margot's face flushed red, but her voice stayed steady. You know what, George? I've dealt with people like you my entire career. People who want to diminish my work, who want to make me feel small, and I'm done with it. I'm done pretending that this kind of behavior is acceptable just because someone has a microphone and a camera. She reached down and unclipped her microphone, the wire trailing behind her as she pulled it off. A sound technician rushed forward to help, but she'd already removed it completely. Where do you think you're going? George demanded. We're in the middle of an interview. No, Margot said firmly, dropping the microphone onto the couch. We're done. This interview is over. George's face turned red. You can't just walk off. You agreed to be here. I agreed to an interview, Margot corrected him. Not a character assassination. There's a difference. Robin stepped forward, her voice gentle. Margot, please, let's just talk about this. Margot turned to Robin, her expression softening slightly. Robin, you've always been kind to me, but I can't stay here and let him continue to disrespect me. I won't do it. George scoffed loudly. This is ridiculous. You're being childish. This is exactly what I was talking about. You can't handle criticism. Margot whipped back around to face him. Criticism? Is that what you call this? Criticism is constructive. What you're doing is bullying, and I don't have to stand here and take it. Bullying? George's voice dripped with sarcasm. Oh, poor little movie star can't handle a few tough questions. Do you know how privileged you sound right now? Michael stepped closer to George. Brother, you need to stop talking. Right now. Or what, Michael? George turned on him. You going to defend her because she's pretty? That's exactly the problem. Everyone treats her with kid gloves because of how she looks. I'm defending her because you're being completely out of line, Michael said, his voice low and serious. This isn't journalism. This is you being cruel for no reason. George pointed at Margot. She's walking off my set in the middle of an interview. She's the one being unprofessional. Your set? Margot's eyebrows shot up. This is Good Morning America, George. It's not your personal platform to attack people. Robin tried once more to de-escalate. Let's all just sit back down and start over. We can edit this part out. But Margot was already gathering her things, her purse, her phone. No, Robin. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I'm not going to give him another chance to insult me. A producer appeared, next to George, whispering urgently in his ear. He brushed her off. I'm not apologizing. I didn't do anything wrong. Of course you don't think you did anything wrong, Margot said, her voice filled with frustration. That's the problem. You think it's okay to treat people this way. I treat everyone the same, George insisted. I ask hard questions. That's my job. No, Margot countered. You ask hard questions to people you respect. What you did to me was different. That was personal. George threw his hands up. Everything is personal with you people. You can't separate your ego from legitimate criticism. You people? Margot repeated. What exactly do you mean by that? George faltered for just a second, realizing how that sounded. Actors. I mean actors. You're all the same. Fragile egos. Can't handle the truth. The truth? Margot's voice rose for the first time. The truth is that you came into this interview with your mind already made up about me. You decided I was just a pretty face who can't act, and nothing I said was going to change that. You weren't interested in a conversation. You wanted a fight. If you can't defend your work, that's on you, George said coldly. I have defended my work, Margot shot back, over and over again, for years, to critics, to journalists, to people like you who think they know everything about me based on what they see on a screen. I don't owe you anything, and I certainly don't owe you the right to disrespect me. Another producer appeared, this one more senior. She spoke urgently to George. We need to go to commercial. Now. George waved her off. We're finishing this conversation. No, we're not, Margot said firmly. She looked directly into the nearest camera. To anyone watching, I'm sorry you had to see this. I came here in good faith to talk about my work, and instead, I was ambushed by someone more interested in tearing me down than having a real conversation. George laughed harshly. Playing the victim. Classic. I'm not playing anything, Margot said. I'm standing up for myself. Something you clearly have a problem with. Robin moved closer to Margot. Let me walk you out. Robin, don't, George warned. She's walking out on us. On the show. I'm walking out on you, George, Margot clarified. Not on Robin, not on Michael, not on the crew who have been nothing but professional. You. Because you don't deserve my time or my respect. Michael nodded at Margot, a gesture of support. You do what you need to do. George's face was bright red now, his voice getting louder. This is unbelievable. You're supposed to be a professional. This is one of the biggest morning shows in America, and you're throwing a tantrum because I asked you some hard questions. They weren't hard questions, Margot said, her voice cutting through his bluster. They were insulting, condescending, and completely inappropriate. And the fact that you can't see the difference is exactly why I need to leave. She started walking toward the exit, her heels clicking on the studio floor. The cameras followed her movement, unsure whether to keep filming. George called after her. You're making a huge mistake. Walking off this show is going to hurt your career. Margot stopped and turned back one last time. My career will be fine, George. I'm more worried about yours after people see how you treat your guests. Is that a threat? George took a step toward her. Michael immediately moved between them. Don't. Just don't. I'm not threatening anyone, Margot said calmly. I'm stating a fact. People are watching. They saw everything. They'll make up their own minds about who is in the wrong here. Robin put a gentle hand on Margot's arm. Come on, I'll walk with you. As they headed toward the exit, George shouted after them. Run away then. That's what you're good at, right? Running away when things get tough. Margot didn't respond. She kept walking, her head held high, Robin beside her. Michael stayed behind, standing between George and the direction they'd gone, his arms crossed. The senior producer finally grabbed George's arm. We're cutting to commercial. Right now. I'm not done, George protested. Yes, you are, the producer said firmly. Camera 3, go to commercial. Do it now. George pulled his arm free, staring at the empty space where Margot had been standing. She can't just walk off. She just did, Michael said quietly. And honestly, man, I don't blame her. George spun to face him. Not you too. She was being ridiculous. No, George, Michael said, his voice serious. You were being cruel. There's a difference between tough questions and attacking someone. You crossed that line about 5 minutes into the interview. A production assistant appeared, headset askew. We're in commercial. We have 2 minutes. George paced back and forth, running his hands through his hair. This is absurd. I was doing my job. Your job is to interview people, Robin's voice came from behind him. She'd returned from walking Margot out. Not to make them feel terrible about themselves. George turned to her. Oh, come on, Robin. You heard the way she was talking to me. After you insulted her repeatedly, Robin said. George, what were you thinking? Telling her she only got roles because of her looks. That she's not a real actress. That was out of line. I was asking what everyone else is thinking, George insisted. No, Robin corrected him. You were projecting your own issues onto her, and it was painful to watch. The senior producer stepped into the middle of the group. Okay, we have 90 seconds. Here's what's going to happen. We come back from commercial, George. You're going to say that Margot had to leave due to a scheduling conflict. Michael and Robin, you're going to pivot to the next segment. We don't mention what just happened. Clear? George opened his mouth to argue, but the producer cut him off. This is not a discussion, George. This is what we're doing. And after the show, you and I are going to have a very long conversation with the executive producers. Robin looked at the producer. Is Margot okay? She's upset, obviously, the producer said, but she's handling it with more grace than most people would. Michael shook his head. Man, George, you really messed up. 60 seconds, the production assistant called out. George sat back down on the couch, straightening his tie. His hands were shaking slightly. Robin and Michael took their seats, but the easy energy from the beginning of the show was completely gone. 45 seconds. Robin leaned over to George. You owe her an apology. For what? George's voice was defensive. For doing my job? For being cruel, Robin said simply. There's no excuse for it. 30 seconds. Michael added, She's right, man. What you said wasn't journalism. It was personal. And it was mean. George didn't respond. He stared straight ahead at the camera, his jaw clenched. 15 seconds. The producer made her way back behind the cameras, speaking into her headset. The crew scrambled back into position, trying to reset for the next segment, as if the last 20 minutes hadn't just exploded their morning show. 10 seconds. Robin took a deep breath, composing herself. Michael did the same, his professional smile returning, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. 5, 4, 3. The production assistant counted down silently with her fingers. 2, 1, and pointed at the cameras. The red light came back on. Robin's voice was smooth and professional as she addressed the viewers. Welcome back to Good Morning America, Unfortunately, Margot Robbie had to leave us due to an unexpected scheduling conflict. But in living rooms and offices across America, millions of people had just watched the whole thing unfold. They'd seen the insults, the confrontation, the moment when a talented actress decided she'd had enough. They'd seen George Stephanopoulos push and push until his guest chose her dignity over publicity. And they'd seen Margot Robbie walk off the set of Good Morning America with her head held high, refusing to be diminished by someone who seemed determined to make her feel small. In the studio, as Robin transitioned to the next segment and the cameras focused elsewhere, George sat stiffly on the couch. The weight of what had just happened was beginning to sink in. Around him, crew members avoided making eye contact. Producers huddled together, already planning damage control. But the damage was done. In 27 seconds of questioning that spiraled into a full-blown confrontation, George Stephanopoulos had turned what should have been a routine celebrity interview into a moment that would be replayed, analyzed, and discussed for days to come. And Margot Robbie, the actress he'd tried to diminish, had shown exactly the kind of strength and professionalism that no amount of hostile questioning could undermine.